All right, and then I'm going to, I'll share my screen if that's okay. But good morning, everyone. My name is Andre Del Valle. I'm the Director of Government Affairs for the Pennsylvania Apartment Association. Today, I'm joined by a number of panelists today that we're going to be going through this presentation. This training today is hosted by a number of folks, both the Pennsylvania Apartment Association, as well as Hapco, Philadelphia Housing Development Corporation, otherwise known as PHDC, and Community Legal Services as well, who's been incredibly helpful in putting this training together. Today, we're going to be hearing from not only myself, but as well as Abraham Pardo, Mary Harper, who are housing counselors, Elizabeth Freed, Sue Wasserkrug, and Honorable Judge Annette Rizzo will also be joining us this morning. With that, I just want to make sure that we were all set. Rachel, should we, oh wait, and the agenda, I'm sorry. Today on the agenda, we're going to be doing an eviction diversion overview. Obviously, there were changes to the program through legislation that Councilmember Helen Gim was able to pass and through City Council. So there was a number of changes that we obviously led to this training today. We're going to give you an update on the 2022 program updates, as well as the application. Our housing counselors are going to fill us in on what they're seeing through mediation. We're going to discuss the eviction diversion outcomes, as well as good faith participation by landlords and some of those best practices. So with that, I'm waiting to see Rachel. I want to make sure, I know we're going to be joined by the judge.
I believe Judge Rizzo is on.
Okay, awesome. So let me promote the judge. I know she wanted to briefly speak, so I'm going to add her on. And without further ado, Judge Rizzo, if you're still on, I would love to pass the baton over to you and give you the floor.
Great, thank you so much. I think my video isn't on. If that's all right, I can just talk. It says I can't start.
Yep, that's perfect, Judge.
Yeah. Andre, you have to allow all the panelists video.
Oh, gotcha. Give me one.
Okay, good. Oh, great.
Sorry about that, Judge. It's giving me a little bit of issue, but if you want to start and then I can.
No, I just want to get started because every moment is precious. I just want to say good morning to everyone. I may not be able to see all of you or you may, but I am here in spirit and body and the total commitment, heart, mind, and soul. So good morning to all of you. And thank you, Andre, and also for PAA and Hapco and Philadelphia Housing. And of course, the other partners we have in public interest, CLS, Cora Good Shepherd. Terrific to bring this program together. I'm going to speak rapidly because you have to get to a pretty robust presentation. I guess we all have to realize we now have learned new lessons in real time. There is constant change. That's what moves us with such great rapidity. That's a discussion for a podcast of just life in general, but that's the constant we have to deal with, the change. So with respect to your universe, you are dealing with a fundamental of living, right? To sustain an ecosystem of housing, right? In one of the largest populated areas on the globe. There's a full challenge, we've seen it, of socio-economic, political, legal, practical issues that really have been challenging since we fell off the cliff in March of 2020. But a new game plan has come about, which has been extraordinary, probably something you would not have seen had we talked about this 5 years ago. And that is this newly found partnership we have in our ecosystem to deal with synergy between the courts, landlord tenants, the council involved, of course, distressed tenants, and just other government agencies. It's an amazing, complicated network ever in fluidity, but it's working. We are moving forward. And at the epicenter of this, of course, is eviction diversion. Why am I in this conversation? Because many years ago in 2008, when, I don't know, did anyone remember, or the mortgage foreclosure crisis, when everything just fell off the cliff then of mortgage financing, we had to, as a court system, pivot to really see what we could do with in terms of a daunting docket with homelessness truly at the very fingertips of so many in our city, distressed homeowners. And we developed in 7 weeks the mortgage foreclosure diversion program. It works. It works. We have taken lessons from that now, unfortunately, years going forward, where of course we've hit, I don't know, a pandemic. Yes, let's throw that into the mix, where we really have had to pivot our business models, how we approach the provision of government services, how we function as individuals in a society stressed on many fronts with respect to employment issues, among others, and of course, health issues at the top of the list. So, lessons learned from that have shown that diversion does work. Now, we were under the hood of the court. We were not pre-sued. We were under the hood of the court mortgage foreclosure, which still exists today as a very, very impactful diversionary program. But what we really do see, is that even in eviction, when this program was developed very quickly with a lot of hearts and minds of those, particularly Rachel Garland, in the middle of all this discussion, with City Council in partnership with the mayor to see that we can start a diversionary program. It sputtered in the beginning. We understand that. It's a shift of culture. But what it has provided, and I think all on this conference can really understand, it provided the epicenter for conversation that is vital. That quote, face to face, even by telephone, to actually focus on a micro basis, certain issues that exist with distressed tenants, to really assist landlords then in dealing with these issues in a functioning way, to of course be a way to process needed, vital government funds in an organized fashion that really brings relief, not just to the tenants, but also to the landlords. Because my bottom line is, I want to see no landlords that have to then pivot and get into mortgage foreclosure diversion. This is the moment for it. There have been ups and downs, but I have to say proudly, Philadelphia, as always, as a national model, has put a process into place that has literally drawn down from the federal funding the most monies of all jurisdictions to actually make sure there's help and relief on an individual basis through our system to those in dire need, to maintain their rental payments, and of course, thereby sustain the landlords and owners who actually have these properties. Philadelphia is such a unique city in the Northeast. It has such a huge stock of single family home housing, but also a mixture of high-rise buildings, of course, and multiple units, public housing, right in our core center. This is not a small city. We're a large city, and also with challenges, of course, of high data on poverty. However, all that combination shows that we can punch through and be in a systemic way, have an approach to this between the landlord community, of course, and the public interest lawyers who represent these tenants and speak on a global policy basis as well as an individual basis, as well as, of course, in conjunction with the court system. It's this ecosystem, as I talk about, that can work together. And diversion has proven itself. You will probably hear later from Sue Wasserkrew, from Cora, Good Shepherd, the data. That's what controls. That's what also came as a result of our mortgage program. The data shows that we reached sustainable solutions, as well as we're seeing, of course, in mediation efforts here with eviction. It works. It gives us that sense, that pause before things proceed down a path of an overworked court system that is trying to punch out of this pandemic, to get relief in the moment, to actually sustain the housing in a vital and important way, as well as provide dialogue on a host of other issues so that there is not just maintenance of the landlord-tenant relationship, but rather enhancement and improvement. That's where we're going. And so I celebrate, just as we did with mortgage foreclosure, the fact that the landlords have stepped up, the organizations have stepped up to speak as a voice, to be in full partnership, to make eviction diversion work, to make it be efficient, to make it be the best it can, to access the wonderful resources that come with a construct like this, such as, I call them our angels, housing counselors. They were the heart of the mortgage foreclosure diversion. They continue to be. And they have really proven themselves in this eviction diversion program. I know you're going to hear from some on this conference. They are vital to all of what goes on. They are that conduit, that individual with such knowledge and connection to other government resources to really sustain the conversation, to really sort out what is best for the tenant to actually keep in a functioning relationship with their landlord. It's a game changer, and you are all part of it. I call you all on this call stewards. You are stewards of this program because, again, it may have been some fits and starts. Welcome to our universe, because it's a shift of culture, as I said. But at the end, when all is said and done, and you see the data and the sustainability and need for improvements along the way, have a voice with your partners, with the attorneys at CLS, with the individuals in city council staffers, with council members, all of whom care so much about this city to maintain not just the individual households, but also, of course, neighborhoods as a whole, and to keep you all in business because you are vital in the sanctity of the home. So here is the bottom line. The insatiable need has been more than demonstrated. As relief funds become available on the local level from state or federal grants, the diversion program is a needed holistic treatment of rent deficiencies to get to the root cause of these delinquencies and bridge them with linkage to other services. Assistance funding without counseling and realistic agreements, in my opinion, do not solve long-term issues. The mission should be clear. We all have it: to stabilize housing for renters in properties where there is an ability to pay rent on a sustainable basis in a habitable property. Only then, of course, then we do our overall mission to continue to make this city as great as it can be. It's struggling to punch through things as other cities, but I think we're almost there to get it done. I really welcome input. I'm so interested in the infusion of resources and commitment from different perspectives to work towards a common goal, and to know that the court system is in the middle of that. They celebrate your connectivity to work together, and they celebrate your input that's in a realistic, vital way to only seek and achieve improvement and leverage of wonderful resources we have in Philadelphia by way of our housing counselors, of course, and Cora and Good Shepherd, and legal assistance, both from landlord's perspective as well as the tenants. So I celebrate all. I look forward to even informal conversation. I can be that conduit to talk to, of course, members of the court system and administrators, and have really felt it to be an honor and a privilege to see how diversion has evolved in this necessary area. You're all doing great things to sustain housing for so many in this city. And I celebrate it, and I'm really very excited to continue to work with this group. Thank you for that opportunity and for what's going to be shared later today. So thank you, Andre, for the opportunity to open these proceedings.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Judge. And, we obviously appreciate all your efforts during this pandemic. So, and thank you for, taking time out of your day to join us this morning. I would be remiss if I didn't also thank Councilmember Alan Baum, who is on the joining us on the call today. I want to thank the council member for also joining us and taking the time this morning. I also want to, would be remiss if I didn't introduce Paul Cohen from Hapco, who's also joining us today, who has been an incredible co-host, as well as working through this program. Paul, I'm not sure if you want to say anything briefly, but if you want to say a quick remark on behalf of Hapco, feel free.
Good morning, everyone. I don't want to take up a lot of time. Just thank you all for being on the call. Hapco is the largest organization representing small landlords throughout the state of Pennsylvania, mostly in the Philadelphia area. Thanks, Andre, for putting this all together. Really appreciate it. And thanks everyone else on the panel for putting this diversion program together. It is a very confusing program. Hopefully, after today, we'll have a lot more sense in how to work through it for everybody. Thanks.
Thank you, Paul. With that, let's, jump right into it. Rachel, I just wanted to make sure I'm going to kick it off to Liz here at the onset.
Yes.
All right, awesome. Liz, let me know when to change, but the floor is all yours here.
Or you can go ahead. So many of you, I'm sure, are familiar with some of the previous iterations of this program, but as of January 1st, we've got an updated 2022 program and application. So there are a number of things that we just wanted to make sure you were all aware of right at the outset. Andre, you can go ahead and switch to the next slide. So just so you're aware of some of the key updates, the legislation requires that landlords participate in this process prior to filing an eviction action. The program in 2022 now covers all issues. It's not just about non-payment anymore. It's about breach, end of lease term cases, basically anything that could result in an eviction filing eventually. There is a narrow exception outlined in the bill if eviction is necessary to prevent imminent harm by the tenant. But other than that narrow exception, everything's going to be going through diversion first. Another thing to be aware of is that there are going to be a number of documents that are required right at the outset of the application. We're going to talk a little bit about that in a minute. And the landlord's got to wait 30 days after the application is approved prior to filing in municipal court. There is a requirement of reasonable good faith participation on the part of the landlord. And there's a pretty clear definition that's now put up on the Eviction Diversion Program website, put out by the city. We'll talk a little bit more about that later as well. And finally, just so you're all aware, one big difference this time around is that mediation dates are only going to be scheduled if the tenant engages in the process, if there's been tenant contact prior to the mediation date. Andre, you can go ahead. So this is just a brief overview of the whole process. In flowchart form, as you can see, we'll go through this in a little bit more detail, but the process starts with the delivery of the notice of tenant diversion rights. That's going to be through the mail with proof of mailing or through personal hand delivery. The landlord then is going to apply online through the web portal, along with submitting some documents. The application is then reviewed. It's going to be approved. The process will move forward or rejected. If it's approved, the hotline is going to reach out to the tenant at this point. The housing counselors are going to be getting involved. They're going to be assigned to the tenant, and mediation dates are going to be scheduled, assuming there has been tenant contact. At that point, the housing counselors, and they'll talk a little bit more about this as well, they're going to be reaching out to the tenant. They're going to be reaching out to the landlord. There's going to be an effort to try and actually reach an agreement before mediation. And if an agreement is reached, the mediation date doesn't even need to happen. If it's not reached before the mediation date, then the date sticks and mediation will move forward. The last stage of the process, the outcome of the mediation is going to be sent to both parties involved, and that's going to mark the end of the eviction diversion program. Andre, you can go ahead. So looping back around to the notice of diversion rights. So this is the city's notice that is required prior to even applying online. You're going to be able to access it right on the Eviction Diversion Program website. Again, that diversion notice is going to be sent via mail with proof of mailing or via hand delivery. You're going to want to hang on to a copy of the notice as well as the proof of delivery, because you're going to need to actually upload those as part of the online application. And just so you know what you're looking at, if you could go to the next slide. This is a copy of the city's notice of diversion rights. Lots of really important information for the tenant on there so that they can engage in the process as quickly as possible. Go ahead. So with respect to the application, this part is fairly self-explanatory. You're going to go to evictiondiversion.phila.gov. There's going to be an apply now button you're going to click on. You're going to provide updated contact information for the tenant, upload that notice of diversion rights as well as proof of delivery. In the application, you're going to be expected to detail as much information as possible with respect to the issues that need to be resolved through mediation, non-payment and otherwise. If you are seeking unpaid rent from the tenant, then the landlord is going to be required to upload a rent ledger as part of the application as well. And we'll talk about that in a little more detail in a minute. So just to walk you through what the application looks like, you can click on that Apply Now button. It's going to bring you into the application. And then on the next page, you can see that second question there, have you sent your tenant a notice of diversion rights? You're going to have to click yes to that, assuming that's been done in order to proceed with the application. And then after that, this is a page where you're going to be asked to detail the various issues that you want to resolve through mediation, non-payment and otherwise. There's a text box under the description of other issues where you're going to be able to outline what you'd like addressed. And again, that's going to be anything that could result in an eventual potential eviction filing. So with respect to the tenant contact information, again, this may seem self-explanatory, but because this is a landlord initiated application, it's absolutely essential that correct, updated information is uploaded as part of the application. Ideally, multiple phone numbers, multiple email addresses, any emergency contact numbers, anything that you have. And actually, good faith participation as outlined by the city on the website requires inputting that information. And it's going to be essential for the hotline and the housing counselors to get tenants to engage in the process. So this is the required documents upload page on the application. As you can see here, there's an opportunity to upload the notice of diversion rights along with the proof of delivery, the rent ledger, and there's also an opportunity to upload a proposed agreement, which I'll talk about in a minute as well. So rent ledgers, many of you I'm sure are familiar with these. Landlords use these to obviously keep track of payments as well as charges to each tenant. We're asking that these are uploaded every time unpaid rent is being sought as part of the eviction diversion program. It can be uploaded as a PDF or a JPEG. The ledger has to be from the last 2 years or from the date of move-in if it's more recent, or the last 0 balance. If you don't have a ledger already available to you, there is a template that's available on the city's diversion website to help you in getting that set up. And again, that's a required document whenever unpaid rent is being sought. And if it's not uploaded, the application will get kicked back. So the proposed agreement, it's not a mandatory document that has to be uploaded, but everyone is highly recommending that it is uploaded. It's a proposed repayment agreement. It can be a proposed move out date, or really any other sort of proposed agreement to resolve the issues that have arisen with the tenant. Again, it's not mandatory, but it will help expedite counseling and pre-mediation negotiations along with mediation, because it's going to be a starting point for the housing counselors to discuss the issues at hand with the tenant. So we strongly encourage that that document is uploaded right off the bat. So once the application is submitted, it's then going to be reviewed for completeness as well as for the uploading of all those documents that we just discussed. After it's reviewed, the landlord's going to receive an auto notice via email and or text when the application has either been approved, rejected, or rejected as incomplete. If it's rejected as incomplete because a document wasn't uploaded or because there's a little bit of missing information, then you'll have an opportunity to just go in and add that information or document. You won't have to reapply completely. If there's a serious problem or some sort of major defect with the application, then you'll actually have to go back in and reapply. And to give you a sense of what those auto notices are going to look like, if you could just move ahead. There we go. So this is what a standard approval is going to look like in email and text form. And then the next screen is going to show you what the rejection because of incomplete information or missing documents is going to look like. You'll be able to just resubmit what's missing. There's also a third option, just a flat rejection. Again, if there's a major problem with the application, you'll have to go in and restart the application. So at this point, I think I will turn it over to our housing counselors to talk about next steps.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Liz. We should have Abe and Mary, if you guys are ready.
Yes, hi, good morning. Can you
Good
guys hear me?
morning.
Hi,
Mary.
for some reason I cannot start my video, so.
All right, try it now, Abe.
Okay. There you go. Hi,
Sorry about that.
hi, good morning, everyone. Thank you for the invitation. Thank you for including the Urban League of Philadelphia as part of this presentation. My name is Abraham Reyes Pardo. I'm the Director of Housing at the Urban League. Also, I'm a HUD certified housing counselor for a city-funded agency. And I have with me as well today my manager of housing services, Mary Harper, also a HUD certified housing counselor. We've had the pleasure already to probably work with some of you or some of your tenants or some of your attorneys as well. And today we want to talk a little bit about what is happening behind closed doors in terms of the counseling. What is it that we're trying to accomplish and do during this sessions that we are having with some of the tenants that are coming through the program. So first of all, what we want you to understand is a tenant will not be connected to a housing counseling agency unless they decide to engage with the process. If the tenant decides to either connect with PLA or PLA is able to connect with the tenant, then at that point they will schedule what we are calling at this time a pre-mediation session. During that pre-mediation session, as it was already very well said, we will be reviewing, as we typically do during our housing counseling sessions, we will be reviewing their household budget and other financial aspects of their situation to see whether or not they're in a position to make or to commit to any kind of agreement that has been already proposed. As you understand, it is highly encouraged as part of a new process for you to give us an idea, to submit that repayment agreement or proposed repayment agreement, and the intention is to give us an idea of what the expectations are. As we previously with the previous process, it will be at times felt like a guessing game of whether or not you will be accepting something. We will have then to send it to representation on the landlord side, and they will have to then talk to someone else maybe, et cetera, et cetera. So that will take a matter of days in some cases. So now, knowing upfront what type of commitment you're able to accept or make will save us a lot of that back and forth, and will help us speed up the process in terms of talking to the tenant with factual information and hopefully coming to the realization of whether or not they can proceed with that or commit to that agreement. As has already been stated, we will only proceed with mediation when we have been able to connect with the tenant. However, as it often happens, tenants might choose to be connecting with a housing counseling agency or Philadelphia Legal Assistance. So we might be circling back if time allowing to some of these cases. Housing counselors, as Judge Reason will very well pointed out, have plenty of experience. We all have plenty of experience in this field. We have been a component of the foreclosure diversion program that has a long history in the city of Philadelphia and was a pioneering program throughout the country, and is now is steadily moving forward. So we are hoping to bring some of the same knowledge and the same care for tenants entering the eviction diversion program. We are here to connect tenants with not only with you or with your representation, with landlords and legal representation, but with other resources that might be available to them as well. It's not only about what can be done and said based on the information that we have, but also trying to help some of these tenants to fill out the gaps, including, and we are very aware that under some circumstances, tenants might not be able to proceed with committing to an agreement, but exploring the possibility under those circumstances of a graceful exit as well. All having the tenants' well-being in mind, and also protecting their ability and their capacity to secure housing if they decide to transition out of a property. So as you know, if a process, once a tenant has an eviction on file or a judgment on file, it will be more complicated for them to secure housing down the road. And now I will turn it over to Mary so she can expand a little bit of what in terms of what happens or what other situations will be covered or can be covered during the housing counseling process.
Well, Abraham, I believe you pretty much covered everything. So what I like to do is just reassure the landlords that the housing counselors, our goal is to come up with some type of resolution. We are mediators. We've been doing this for a very long time in the diversion program, the mortgage foreclosure diversion program. So the housing counselors, we have experience in this process. And I just want to add, our recommendation through this process was to start collecting documentation from the tenants so that we can determine their ability to pay. So we want to be able to put together plans that are that will have the tenants stabilized and plans that they can actually move forward and follow through with. So all I'm saying is that this program is very successful. That's why they have extended it for as long as they have. And, you know, we are, again, we're going to be there, you know, to try to make a resolution between the landlord and the tenant. That's our goal.
And thank you, Mary. And I just want to clarify something that based on some of the information I'm seeing on the chat. Just for the sake of capacity, right now we are giving or prioritizing any assistance that we can provide to cases that are coming through the program, cases that have been filed and submitted by approved and submitted by PLA. As you can imagine, we have seen an increase of individuals and families reaching out to us for assistance. There are some that we are able to help or connect with resources, and in some cases, just to capacity, we are not able to engage as deep or as we would like to. So certainly, when you enter a case on the eviction mediation diversion program, you are opening and connecting that tenant with other resources, I like to call ourselves navigators. We will help these tenants sort out their own situation and see how that will impact their options in terms of, and ultimately your options as well. Thank you.
Can I jump in? It's Judge Rizzo very quickly to underscore how wonderful the housing counselors have been from a financial literacy perspective to really help navigate, as you say, Abraham, not just stability in housing, but also the attendant parts. But there was a question in chat, I know that's been developed. There's a whole array, right? A cafeteria plan of resources and solutions. And one of it may be, at the end of the day, graceful exit. It's a phrase, of course, you all know, from mortgage foreclosure, and something that works where still there's connectivity and communication of graceful exit if necessary as an option. Hopefully not, but part of the whole cafeteria plan in our tool chest.
Right. Yes.
That is
Yes.
correct.
A range of options, including but not limited to graceful exit.
Well, thank you so much, Abraham, Mary, and obviously Judge Rizzo once again for all this important information. I know we're cutting it close on time now, so I just wanted to make sure I showed this slide. Abraham, not sure if you wanted to touch anything on here.
Yeah, just to remind that again, that it's not only that we're housing counselors, but we're HUD certified housing counselors, which means that every person who's touching on a file is certified by the Department of Housing. There are over 20 housing counseling agencies across the city. The city of Philadelphia has funded a very robust network of HUD approved housing counseling agencies. And again, remind everyone that this is the program is new, but we have a background and we have demonstrated our ability to deal with similar situations through the mortgage foreclosure diversion program. Thank you.
Thank you, Abraham. Next up, I believe we have Sue, who's going to run us through mediation.
Correct. Thank you. Here we go. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for having me, Andre. It's nice to be here. It's nice to see some familiar faces and names. My name is Sue Wasserkrug. I'm a program administrator at Cora Services in our Good Shepherd Mediation division. We, as part of the Eviction Diversion program, we have trained dozens and dozens and dozens of volunteer mediators, and we can coordinate the mediation aspect of the program. Just as you can see here, I just wanted to point out that our mission as an organization is to encourage peace, reconciliation, and social justice by empowering individuals to resolve their conflicts. So I guess you can go on to the next slide. I'm going to be really quick here today. For those of you who maybe aren't familiar with mediation, let me just briefly say it's a process. It's an opportunity for resolving a dispute where the two parties, in this case, it's the landlord and the tenant, sit down together with a completely neutral third party. That's the mediator, who in these cases is a volunteer, to listen to each other's perspective on the conflict or the dispute, the issues at hand. And, you know, what the mediator does is moves the conversation forward in a way to assist the parties in reaching a resolution that works for both of them. So in other words, you know, something that's sustainable. And this is only possible when these cases get to meet, if these cases come to mediation, this is possible because of the pre-mediation work that the housing counselors have done with the tenant. You know, and if as a result of that pre-mediation counseling, if the housing counselor is not able to negotiate with the landlord in a way that reaches, you know, comes to an agreement, then the parties will come to a mediation session. And as it says here, within 30 days of approval. Because of the pandemic and quite frankly, the sheer volume of cases that we see, we've been doing these mediations by telephone. So, when I say the parties are coming together, in the old days, we literally meant sitting around a table together, but of course now it's all done by telephone. You'll receive, for those of you who are new to this program, you'll receive a phone number to call in. It's just a classic conference call. You'll receive a phone number and also a 5-digit passcode to admit you to the conference call, the mediation conference call. So, as Abraham mentioned, as others have mentioned, if an agreement has not been reached prior to the mediation date that's already been scheduled, then you'll come together for mediation. If an agreement has been reached, then that mediation date that you will have already received, that mediation will be canceled if an agreement has already been reached. Now, let's say you're in the mediation session and in the course of the session, an agreement is reached. The mediator will write it down, will read it back to you, and will indicate on the agreement form that the parties have verbally agreed to what's been reviewed. Then the mediator, the volunteer mediator, will email the agreement to us, to our staff at Cora Good Shepherd, our diversion mediation manager, who will just review it. We maintain the files, and then we will send it out to a copy of it out to you and the tenant. We'll also copy the housing counselor on that email. And you can go on to the next slide, I think is still me. Right. So, right, the agreement is sent to both parties. If no agreement is reached during the mediation session, it may be that another session is needed. You can always schedule a second session if you're not able to get through everything. We generally, the line is free for all of you for an hour. Usually you can go over if you need to. If for some reason, additional information is needed, you just can't reach an agreement at that time because, like I said, maybe some additional information is needed. You're more than welcome to schedule a second mediation session. If that's not the case, if everything's on the table and yet an agreement can't be reached, then the mediator will inform us at Cora Good Shepherd that no agreement was reached, and the mediator will make a recommendation about particularly the landlord's good faith participation in the program. And then if, either an agreement will be sent out to the parties or the parties will receive a notification of the outcome of the program, which I'm not really sure, but may be requested by municipal court prior to you filing an eviction complaint. And as I said, follow up. Oh, if anything comes up, if it turns out that the mediated agreement, something came up and it's not quite working as the parties would like, you can always schedule a follow-up session to tweak the agreement. We can't see the future. Sometimes, we don't always know how things will play out in the future. So it's fine to come back for a follow-up mediation if you need to. And you can go to the next slide, which I think, Andre, I'm turning it back to you for this.
That is correct. Thank you so much.
Great. Thanks, everyone.
So folks, throughout the presentation, you've heard a lot about landlord good faith participation. Here's some of the points that the city has put out on what that good faith looks like. The first is, I know we mentioned early in the presentation, the notice of diversion rights. So that would, sending that notice of diversion rights is good faith participation in this program, providing updated ledgers along with info on any other issues requiring mediation, that as well. Current and accurate tenant information. Personally, I know this is sometimes difficult for landlords to gather, especially with short-term leases and obviously with the extensions we've had throughout this pandemic. But ensuring that you have current and updated information on the tenants, that way the city can do their outreach. That's another good faith participation. Responding timely to housing counselors. We're trying obviously to set up these mediations and obviously address the concerns, and obviously the intent of the program is to hopefully come to some sort of agreement. The only way the city can do that and the private sector can do that is obviously having open dialogue and communication. So, responding to the housing counselors helps throughout this process cut down some of those delays. Obviously, attending the mediation session, that landlord, agent, attorney, or someone with negotiating authority can attend the mediation sessions. As I mentioned before, the intent is to reach some sort of agreement and work something out, hopefully before having to go through the courts. And lastly, making reasonable efforts to address all lease issues that could lead to an eviction action is another form of good faith participation. Some of the best practices, we've discussed this with CLS, the city, on what these best practices are. Updating email and phone contact information with tenants every 6 months. At the time of, we know some members do it at the time of lease renewal. Others just do it periodically and proactively. So this is, just a recommendation on some of the best practices that we've seen for updating that contact information. Current contact information is vital in cases of emergency or repairs, as well as obviously this diversion program, which we are discussing today. Approaching diversion with an open mind and the mutual goal of increasing stability for both landlords and tenants. Obviously, I think in this pandemic, landlords do not want to add to housing instability, but we also recognize that landlords have also been waiting for rental assistance and funds in that program. And with that, program now being closed, it does make it difficult to receive those funds. But we do hope that you would come into this with an open mind and, with the goal of hopefully reaching some sort of mutual agreement with the landlord and tenant to hopefully prevent housing instability, but also helping the landlord gather their arrears that they haven't seen in a year or two, depending on what phase of rental assistance you had applied for. And then, lastly, one of the best practices that we are encouraging landlords to do is to propose an agreement that is sustainable for the tenant to increase chances of mutual beneficial resolution, hopefully avoiding court, the cost of court, a court process, unit turnover, vacancy, any damages. So, we're hoping that at the onset of this process that landlords would proactively upload agreements, and hopefully that is a point for folks to at least start those communications on. I know, I speak for the Pennsylvania Apartment Association. I know this program isn't perfect, but we are trying to work through it, and we're hoping that through a lot of these conversations that housing instability and those arrears can be addressed. And, for additional information, obviously, we're talking a lot about eviction diversion today, which was brought about through legislation. That is Bill 210920, which was introduced and passed by Councilmember Gim. If you'd like to look at the legislation and what that legislation says explicitly, we have attached a link, which once again, we will be sending out. And any eviction diversion program questions can also be addressed, or you know, a lot of the FAQs are up on the website, so you can visit the website as well. We are going to be sending out all the information that you've seen today shortly after the meeting concludes, and as well as sending the meeting recording in case you missed anything. We want to make sure that you see it. I do want to add, because this did happen last time, the Pennsylvania Apartment Association, Hapco, CLS, Urban League, you know, we do not administer rental assistance. We are not the administrators of that program. So if you have any questions related to specifically to an application that's outstanding, please visit the rental assistance website. I can add that in the email as well, but we are not the program administrators. We do not have access to that database. So I just want to save a lot of emails to my colleagues that are on the panel today. If you have any questions, we'll put that in the email. I would also be remiss if I didn't thank Rue Landau from the Philadelphia Bar for all her assistance. I know she's on the call today. I know there's a lot of frustration. I've seen the chat today as well. You know, landlords, you're not alone. There's 114 folks on this call, about 110 landlords that did RSVP for this training. We know there's a lot of questions. We're hoping that the city will commit to a second session where we're able to ask questions directly to the city and to mediators about the program specifically. So we are working on that, but I am going to stop there talking because I do want to see if we can have a quick round of questions, if that's okay with you, Rachel and my fellow panelists.
Sure. So Andre, maybe I can address some of the questions that have been coming up frequently in the chats.
That's great.
So the question I see most often is what happens if a tenant doesn't keep, if you go through the diversion program, you work out an agreement, and then the tenant breaks the agreement. So as Sue Wasser-Krug from Cora Good Shepherd said, within a year of the original agreement, you are welcome to reach out directly to Cora Good Shepherd, to the mediation organization, by email. You can email them at evictiondiversion@coragoodshepherd.org and schedule a follow-up mediation session.
Let me just correct that email address. I'll put it in the chat.
Okay, thank you. And to schedule a follow-up mediation session, you don't have to go back through the application process and wait. The mediators are inviting you to come back to the table and consider the conversation. You also do have the option of going forward with the court process at that time. But if you want to re-engage with mediation, you don't have to reapply. You can just reach it back out and the mediator will schedule a follow-up mediation session, hopefully with the same housing counselor as well, to continue the conversation. There was another.
Rachel, would that be within 30 days or would you get it quicker?
No, you probably get it faster. Yeah, because you wouldn't have to go back through the process. A similar question that I didn't answer in chat because it was hard to figure out how to word it in writing, but is this mediation agreement legally binding? I guess it depends on what your question is. It is an agreement between the two parties in the same way that your lease is an agreement between the two parties, or an amendment to the lease is an agreement between the two parties. A mediated agreement is also an agreement between the two parties. It doesn't mean that you can then take eviction actions on your own. So let's say you work out an agreement that if the tenant's to pay their rent plus an extra $100, or an agreement that the tenant is to move out on January 30th. If the agreement doesn't happen, the landlord can't just change the locks at that time. That would still be considered an illegal eviction, and the landlord would still need to go through the court process at that point.
I just want to add, as a landlord, you probably don't want that to be legally binding. You have a lease agreement. That's the legally binding document. That's really what you want to be legally binding, not so much this agreement that's probably going to hurt you. You're not helping yourself with this agreement. You're more or less helping the tenant. So do you really want that to be legally binding?
Thanks, Paul. Another question that came up, is this program optional? No, it is not optional at this time. The city council legislation does require that landlords go through the program before filing a case in court. And then the last question that I wanted to make sure I got to, what is a reasonable effort to address lease issues that could lead to eviction action? I think this question was based off of the reasonable good faith participation. And so what that means is that when the mediation session happens, it's expected that both the landlord and the tenant come prepared to discuss issues that are raised as part of the mediation. So this is a little bit different than in court, where in court, it's just the issues that the landlord is raising against the tenant. In a mediation session, it is sometimes issues that are raised by both sides. And so it is a conversation that goes in both directions. There are some more written questions, and I will answer them now if people want to stay on for a moment in writing. But that's all I have. Thanks, Andre.
Could I ask you a couple questions too while you guys are all on the phone? If a tenant refuses to engage in the process, does the landlord still have to wait 30 days to file a landlord-tenant complaint? And if so, why?
Yes, at this time, there's a 30-day window from the date of approval for a mediation session to be scheduled. So if the tenant engages and there's time to schedule that mediation session within those 30 days, that will happen.
Right, but if the tenant's refusing to engage, why should the landlord have to still wait 30 days?
So that's definitely something that's been raised by landlords and Pennsylvania Apartment Association, and I do think that that's going to be built into the process at some point, but there wasn't enough time to build that in quite yet. So my understanding is that that's right now it's a 30-day timeline, but that's definitely under consideration.
If a case goes to mediation and it's not resolved and it needs to go to court, can it go to court right away?
Yes, the landlord can file in court right away.
He doesn't have to wait the 30 days.
What do you? Sorry.
If you go to mediation, let's say you get a mediation hearing in 10 days and it can't get resolved and it's decided it has to go to court, does the landlord still have to wait the 30 days?
Yeah, we should be so lucky to be in that situation. No, I don't think well, you know what? I'd have to take another look at the legislation. It is possible that the legislation requires that the landlord wait the 30 days.
It does.
So then let's stick with that.
Is it 30 days from approval or 30 days from applying? Because I don't think that's clear in the legislation.
30 days from approval.
Where does it say that?
I will look at the legislation, but that is how the program is currently counting the 30 days.
So if
Ultimately,
it
it's up to the court to determine how the court wants to interpret it.
So if the program is swamped by cases and it takes 7 days to get approved, you have to wait 37 days now before you can apply.
That is not the goal of the program, for it to wait that long for approval.
Okay. What does proof of delivery mean? Because a lot of people think that means certified mail, but it doesn't really, right?
Yeah, so it can be certified mail, but it could also, I believe, just be, you can go to the post office and get proof of delivery, which is not the same thing as certified mail.
Okay. And what if you don't have the tenant's cell phone number and or email address? Because this is a huge concern. When you're filling out the application, you can't get beyond the screen if you don't plug in an email address and telephone number. And the email address has to be like a .com or a .org, something like that. You can't just say NA. It won't let you get to the next screen.
We recognize that this is going to be a big shift for landlords, that when applying for eviction in court, landlords only needed to provide the name and address of the tenant. However, we believe that many of the issues that occur between landlords and tenants could be resolved through communication between landlords and tenants. And part of the goal of the diversion program is to reestablish lines of communication. And it is very difficult to communicate if you do not have a means of communicating. So one of the things that we're going to be working both, hopefully, with you, Paul, and Hapco and the Pennsylvania Apartment Association, is talking through best practices. We find that there are some landlords who are very good at having tenant contact information, and they routinely catch up with their tenants via text message or email. And so helping share out the best practices of these landlords with other landlords who might not have instituted them yet. But we are hoping to move landlords and tenants to a place where they do have ready contact information for each other, so that issues can be resolved as they come up, and not become worse over time through lack of communication.
Yeah, I understand that. But right now, if you don't have that information as a landlord, you cannot file for diversion because you can't fill out the form.
Right, but you also wouldn't be able to handle if there was an emergency issue that came up at the property. You wouldn't be able to handle that either. So it's not just an issue about applying for diversion. You know, it's a larger issue for a landlord if they don't have good contact information for the tenant.
So you're
So-
saying if they don't have that contact information, they just can't file a diversion case and can't proceed to evict the tenant that's not paying?
Not at this time, no, they need to have contact information for the tenant.
Okay, is that in the ordinance?
I would have to check the ordinance again. But the program is built on being able to reach the tenant. If you can't reach the tenant, then they can't participate in the program. And with a turnaround time of 30 days, the best way to reach a tenant within that time period is by phone or email.
Well, the tenant is given the notice of rights, and in the notice of rights, it has a phone number for the tenant to call a hotline. That's how the tenant is supposed to participate in the program, and that's what this ordinance says. Doesn't say you have to have a cell phone number and an email. So I think that needs to be corrected immediately.
So obviously, you know, there's a lot of questions about this program. I think what would probably be best, and I know a lot of folks are dropping questions into the chat. I think what would be a best next step for us would be to set up a second, more of a Q&A style type of webinar to kind of flush out a lot of these questions that are being asked. I know folks have a lot of questions. I know this is in, you know, what this presentation, as much as we wanted it to answer every single question, we know that there's unique circumstances to everyone's eviction case, whether it be, you know, a tenant non-responding, you know, a tenant's threatening, whatever the case may be. So I think that may be the best next step for us in scheduling that. And I'm happy to connect with all the folks offline on this. I do want to say, you know, I definitely want to thank all of our panelists once again for all your information today. I'd like to thank Hapco for co-hosting Community Legal Services, PHDC, Sue and her team at Good Shepherd. Definitely want to thank everyone, all the landlords and representatives who joined us today. Once again, we will be sending out the meeting, the video, along with the slide deck, so you have that. And once again, PAA, Hapco, CLS, Urban League, we do not handle, even Good Shepherd, we do not handle rental assistance. So if there's any rental assistance questions that you may have, please visit the website link, which I will put in the email for rental assistance to get your status. But once again, thank you everyone for joining. And if you have any questions, landlord related issues, please feel free to reach out to myself at PAA or Paul over at Hapco. We're happy to help. But with that, thank you so much for joining us, and we'll catch up shortly.
Thanks, everyone. And thanks, Andre, for putting this together. Great job.
Absolutely.
Thank you all. Take care.